Keith, not me.
Keith.
And yeah, I mean, you know, how do I possibly share 39 years of recovery in whatever time I've got? It's impossible. So I just have to maybe try and pick some things out. Like Cass said to me, send me a message this morning. I've got a theme. Well, I suppose I've got a bit of a theme, really, which I'll come to. That reading is absolutely perfect for me today. Absolutely perfect. So I suppose I could kind of start there. Yeah, so I loved right from the start. I loved alcohol and I loved the lifestyle. And later on, I got into other substances, and yeah, mainly I love the life I live, really. And as I went on in my, I hardly read anything when I was a kid, when I was at school. I did a bit of reading, but I didn't do much. But I became an avid reader in my active addiction, actually, after I got married. I read loads of stuff. And also, I worked in the shipyards for quite a long time, and I became a self-styled anarchist, or whatever you want to call it. But I read a book that changed my life. I think what I learned about the world exists in power and control. I mean, that's what still does. It's no different. It's never changed. It's all about power and control. And that's why I love Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's the complete opposite. It's about powerlessness. And when I read that this morning, it was like, because some of my heroes were Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Ho Chi Minh, Trotsky, Lenin, all the communists, all the revolutionaries, Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela as well. So, and I always wanted to be a revolutionary, but I didn't have that kind of courage, you know what I mean? I kind of always, I was always fantasizing about going to Ireland and joining in the IRA struggle, all that nonsense, whatever. But it was all barren bullshit, which I loved. But I thought, what Alcoholics Anonymous has given me, I've become a revolutionary Alcoholics Anonymous, because I'm in a revolution against pharmaceutical companies. And I have been ever since I came in, and I make no bones about that, I think whatever they are, and I've been able to do something about that in my recovery. I've been able to hopefully make people aware of how dangerous pharmaceuticals are, etc., etc. So yeah, but that's not my thing. So away I went. I got married when I was 22. She was 17 and pregnant, and we bought a house. I had a car at the time. Probably I made a solar car. Bought a house, and it was just. You would have thought that there was a time there when I should have actually changed. I should have become responsible, but I didn't. I remained irresponsible. I carried on my life like I was a single man, and so it went on, and then I got into my different periods of my addiction, and a phase where I got into, where we both did, my wife and I, we both got into LSD, and that was a period that also was a big game changer for me. Using LSD and getting into that kind of scene, which I loved. Took LSD, and then I thought if everybody in the world dropped acid, then everything would be okay. You know what I mean? Well, I didn't realise that people who were messed up like myself shouldn't be taking acid. And that kind of came later, and I remember part of that period. I remember sitting in my house and with with lots of other people, you know, because you know, my house was the party house, and we would, and I remember sitting in there with people. I can't remember how many, a lot of people, all the guys who moved down around with, and we'd take an acid. And we were all again fantasising about we're going to buy a double-decker bus and go around the world. Do you know what I mean? And everybody's there, and, oh yeah, that sounds good, you know, and everybody, you know, and hallucinating like hell, and it sounded, you know, listening to Sgt. Pepper's, listening to the Beatles, listening to Lucy Sky and the Diamonds, and seeing that for the first time, and people go, oh wow, gee, that listen, LSD, Lucy Sky with that, and I said, oh yeah, wow, you know, and all that stuff that goes on with taking acid. So yeah, so we had this big plan. We were all gonna go around the world, and when all this was going on, I had a child upstairs asleep, you know, and we were going to take her, whatever the plan was. Anyway, but by the time the week after came, everybody's putting in the kitty, and nobody's putting in. Do you know what I mean? So nobody's putting in the kitty. So I know a few people were. I think we raised about 30 quid, whatever. I can forget that idea. Do you know what I mean? That didn't happen. So I carried on, and then had another child, and piling on more responsibility. And and working, and it was kind of, you know, the town that I came from was, I mean, that's what it was about really. I mean, the main employer was a shipyard. You know, previously there had been sorry, I never do this one, do I? Yeah, whereas so you know, so the ship, so working in the shipyards where most people worked, and that was people's life. That's what you did, you know. And the weekends were when everybody went out. You know what I mean? Well, everybody I knew went out. You know, we went out from Friday and until Sunday. You know, and I love that life. And I suppose, and the progression of that was that it just got more and more. And the bigger my responsibilities got, like going from 1 to 3 children, the bigger my responsibilities got, the worse it became for me. The way that, you know, I couldn't stand it. So the more I started drinking, and the more I started using, you know. And then in the end, was complete chaos. My wife was also an alcoholic and drug addict, so it kind of really, you know, when I look back in retrospect, it's what held us together. Our addiction held us together for about 14 years and 3 kids. And it was a thing we had in common. So it was and anyway, so that kind of went on, and it got worse, and then eventually my wife had enough, and she left, and it was like, to me, it was the worst day of my life and the best day of my life. It was the worst thing that happened to me, the best thing that happened, was she left, and I was absolutely mortified. You know, I thought, you know, how am I gonna cope? And then my addiction just got worse and worse, and then eventually, and then what happened was, and then when she got left, I went downhill then very fast, and then eventually started going into treatment and et cetera. And you all know the story, going into treatment until eventually I found the solution, you know. But it was, but I think if I go back and I look at the end for me, whereas in the beginning of being married, I had some kind of responsibility, and at the end it had all gone, and I'd become absolutely somebody that I suppose that I couldn't even recognise, that I don't recognise today, but that's the person I've become, I'm afraid, you know. And I didn't start off life like that. I started off life like most people, with aspirations and dreams and etc., and it all, and then eventually it all absolutely collapsed on me. Whereas at the end for me was that I abdicated all responsibility, and I sold my children's home, and I vowed never ever to support my children ever again, or support my wife ever again. I vowed that I would never ever work again, and off I went. And I got my share of the money from the house, and I spent it all on me. And then, if that wasn't enough, I then got another load of money, because at the time I was on the railway. I got another load of redundancy money, and I spent all that money on me, and never thought about supporting my children. Never gave my children anything. Never gave my ex-wife anything. It was all for me, and that's the kind of selfishness that I ended up with, and that's the person who I was. That's the person that I had to actually. That's what I had to own in the end when I started. You know, when I got the solution of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had to do the work, and I had to do the steps, and I had to look at who I've become. It was like it was like frightening. It destroyed me. That I'd become that. I didn't self-believe that I'd become that person, and I was absolutely wrapped with all sorts of guilt. It's funny, yesterday, because at a meeting yesterday, and the theme of the meeting was actually about step 3, and it was about handing your life and your will over to the care of God. And I remember the exact moment that happened to me was when my children came to visit me, and I had my mum. My children came to visit me. I was in treatment. They came to visit me, and they wanted my help. They were in the mess. Their home life was in the mess with the mother, and they wanted me to help them. And I was in a rehab. I was in a rehab with no money, no job prospects, nothing, nowhere to live, nothing, and they wanted my help. And it was like my moment, and I thought, I can't live like this anymore. I've got to change this. And I believe that was the moment that I handed my life and my will over to the care of Alcoholics Anonymous. And from that moment on, it's for me, it's been absolutely beyond my wildest dreams. I used to hear that a lot when I was last time I was in treatment. There was a woman in there, and she used to say that all the time. The only one I go, what are you talking about? You've been mad beyond your wildest dreams. How come beyond your wildest dreams? But that's been my experience. My experience has been, I suppose I didn't know it that day, because what happened to me just after that experience with my children, I was going for a cup of coffee on a Sunday night, and all of a sudden it was like, wow, I don't have to drink, I don't have to use anymore, and the compulsion that night had been taken away from me, and it's never ever returned. And it was like, wow. And that for me was a miracle, because every time, even periods when I was dry, sober, whatever you want to call it, every time I wanted to use, I used. I didn't mess about, I used. I never thought it ever, I used. And that had gone. And that for me was like what God needed to do for me, was to take that away. And he did. And it's never come back, you know. And from then on, I've done what I needed to do, I suppose. It's like it's like I I live in Alcoholics Anonymous and I come to the world. Lots of people, there's two kinds of people who come to AA. Some people live in the world and come to AA, and nothing wrong with that. I think it's absolutely fine if you do that. I ain't got a problem with that. Not for me. I live in Alcoholics Anonymous and come to the world because I gave my right to live in the world up. And thank God I did that. And thank God I did give my life and we went over to Alcoholics Anonymous because it's paid me back like I won't believe. But, you know, I've had to work for that. You know, I've had to do what's necessary. You know, in the beginning for me, I was doing 7, sometimes more than 7 meetings a week, sometimes 10 meetings a week, but never less than 7 for years. You know, because I loved it and I wanted to get better. You know, and it was as simple as that. You know, I mean, even today I still do 3 meetings a week. Today, you know, yeah. It's like I've always trusted and always believed in this program, and I haven't been, you know, it tells you in the book I haven't been perfect. I've done things that are not okay. And I suffer the consequences of whatever they are when I've done things that are not okay. You know, and I live with these consequences. But the major thing is, I don't pick up. I've never wanted to pick up. What I've had to do is solve it, and solve it using the program. And I've always done that, you know. I've been in situations where I've been phoning my sponsor, and he's saying to me, don't do that. And I'm going, no, I'm doing it. He said, don't do it. There'll be consequences. No, I'm doing it. And then I do it, and I know, and when I'm doing it, I know there's going to be consequences. Yeah, but not today. Well, then they come. And then they come, and then I have to deal with it. And I would deal with it, and then move on. Because that's what step 10 is there for. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. So what I'd like to finish on is something that happened to me. Something that happened to me this week. I got a message from a guy from London called James Malott. And I know he won't mind me telling his name. And he sent me a clip of a TV program. And the reason he sent me the clip was because the man in the clip was raising dahlias, flower, and it was, and I don't think anybody in here will remember. You'd have to be English. There used to be a program called World in Action in the UK. I think it was on a Monday night. It was all about. It was controversial, and it was always about exposing stuff and exposing wrongdoings and all that. And it was hosted by, it was a guy, a journalist called John Pilger. I don't know even whether John Pilger's still alive, but he was an amazing journalist. And what he did was, this was a day in the life of a working man, and it was 1971, and there was a lot of strife in the UK with unions striking and etc. And it was 1971, and he did a day in this guy's life, and this guy was a working class man who lived in a small house, who went to work in a factory, and his wife had a little job, and they had children they were raising, and he cultivated these dahlias, you know, and that was his life. And he was interviewing, saying, "What do you do?" And then we save up, and then we go to Bridlington on 2 weeks holiday a year, and on he went. And there's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. He was happy. I'm not happy with that. But he was happy with that, you know, and it was like a true reflection for me of the British working man, especially the town I came from, where everybody's happy with their lot, so to speak. And I was never happy with my lot. You know, hence I got into alcohol and drugs. And so I sent this I sent this clip to the guy who sponsors me now, a guy called Glenn, and I sent this to him knowing he would understand this clip because he's the same kind of background as me, apart from he's younger, and I sent him the clip, and I've never done this before in a meeting, read something, but I will. This guy was called, the guy in the TV program was called Jack Walker. So he replies to me and he goes, Jack Walker, what a legend. And then he goes, Happy Jack, could you imagine still in York, 2 up, 2 down, in Bannerman-Furness, after 50 years, working in a factory on a shipyard with dementia and lung disease, waiting to die? What a life. Drugs and alcohol saved us from that. Ooh, absolutely right. And I thought, yeah, and absolutely right on. Because it did, didn't it? Because at the end of the day, it did. Being a drug addict, it got me out of that. It destroyed me, and it was absolutely awful at the end for me. Absolutely destroyed me, destroyed my family, destroyed my parents, destroyed everything good around me. But the reality was, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me life, gave me this. So this morning, I look out of my bedroom window and I see the Indian Ocean. Not 2 up, 2 down in a deprived area in Bannerman-Furness anymore. You know, I look out of my window and I'm in the Indian Ocean. And I didn't do that. I didn't do it. I wasn't capable of doing that. I was an absolute mess. I wasn't capable of doing anything. And in the end, you know, Alcoholics Anonymous did that for me. And then the other thing I'd like to say was, I'd like to end with, when we were tripping that night, and we were saving up for the bus to go around the world, right? Never went anywhere. Look if we went next door. But anyway, never went anywhere. And again, drugs and alcohol. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous. I never did anything. I did a lot of travelling in the UK, but I'd never been in a plane. The first time I got in a plane, I flew to Mombasa in Kenya on holiday. Again, in Alcoholics Anonymous, X amount of years sober, whatever it was, I went, you know, and so, and that began, and then I started my travelling. And I didn't need to go around the world with them on the bus. I was now doing it on my own. And I was doing a lot of the travelling, you know, on my own. With my partner, but I was travelling, you know. So I was actually, what I was sitting there in complete fancy about, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me. It gave me. You know, since then I've been all over the world. You know, absolutely incredible, you know, and I will never forget, ever. See, my gratitude is to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's, you know, because without that, I can't do any of that. I've been able to do that because of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and I will be forever grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous and how it's changed my life. And I can go on and on and on, save my children's life as well. You know, I've got a daughter who's 14 years clean sober. I've got a grandson who's in the, you know, and they are also involved. They're not, you know, do go to a meeting once, but they're involved in the fellowship, both of them. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose because, you know, because the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous was a book that was read in my house. It wasn't a coaster, it was read, and it was read regularly, and they knew, and all my children have known that we go to meetings, and I go to meetings, and I've always gone to meetings, obviously for a long time, and now I'm old, I'm still going to meetings. So anyway, I think thanks all for listening. It was a bit disjointing, but whatever. I'll see if I can do better next year. On my big one. Okay. Thank you.